What's up, Mike? How you doing?
Doing well, man. How are you?
I'm doing good. Thanks for jumping on. So, just kind of want to let the listeners know we are friends, so they might be able to hear that in this conversation just by how we're talking to each other. So, if I say the word Mikey here and there, that's what I call Mike. I don't even know if anybody else calls him that, but just one day that's what I've called him. I think that's what I'll always call him. But we'll start off with this is Mike Anderson. So, I appreciate you jumping on. I got a few things I was we talk on the regular, and you just got done with a 75 hard challenge. And I know people might not know what that is, but I'm going to have you explain it here in just a bit. But anybody who can wear that, badge is pretty cool in my eyes because I know exactly what it is and you can explain what it is. But anybody who can accomplish that, I'm like, man, the mental discipline to get through that. I mean, I go on these challenges here and there and but that one specifically I've thought about many times and I'm like I don't know if I have it in me to accomplish it, and you pulled that off, and seeing your journey and just texting you almost every day through it was so cool. So let's first that's why I brought you on to kind of talk about that and also your real estate business and production while going through that. But let's start off with who is Mike Anderson? Like what got you obviously this is a real estate podcast. So what got you into real estate? Why'd you make that decision, and kind of what's your career path look like so far?
Yeah, no doubt. What got me into real estate? I don't even know what got me into real estate, to be honest. I took real estate, like college was not really for me. So I went into real estate when I was like 18, 19. Didn't take it very serious, never ended up passing the test, and then circled back like 5 years later. Got the license, and corporate America wasn't working out. So I just kind of jumped in full steam ahead. Haven't looked back since. Um, as far as you talking about the same five hard.
Yeah, just I mean, just talk, I just wanted to hear your story of just how you got started in real estate and why. I mean, so that was just because you didn't want to. I mean, you were just straight up like, I don't want. What was your corporate America job? Like, what did you do?
I was working at CVS, the pharmacy. I was working at their corporate building in Scottsdale. So I was an account manager for their prescription benefit manager side. So we managed clients. They have customers that have prescription benefits, and we managed all of their benefits for them.
So did you
Corporate
do?
America, I found out very quickly, was just not for me.
It wasn't for me either, dude. So were you doing real estate like part time while you had that job?
No, I had my license, but I wasn't active at all. I had a really close friend of mine that was in real estate full time. He was a top 1% realtor. And I had actually gone through a divorce. And I think the divorce really kind of sprung me forward of like, all right, what do I want to do? Like, how am I going to flip this into a positive? And so we sold the house, split the equity, and what better time to hop into a job that doesn't pay you anything than when you have some cash sitting on the sideline. So that's really what spurred me to jump into it, was just to take a risk.
What'd your first year look like? Well,
First year, I did a lot of my buddy that was in it was my mentor, and I helped him out quite a bit. Um, he paid me to like be kind of like a buyer's agent, but also assistant, open houses, things like that. Learned a ton from him. Honestly, I don't know how it would have worked out if I didn't have him kind of showing me how to do it, right? Because I think everyone's biggest concern, and we have agents in our accountability calls, I can see them running through the same things of like, you don't know what you don't know. So you're super gun shy on advising anyone or doing anything because you don't want to, misstep or advise someone wrong. But having someone there kind of hand holding you and explaining everything was very helpful. So first year production wise, I didn't really focus on production. I just kind of was his mentee and kind of just learned the business.
yeah, you think more people would do that. I think there's a lot of agents that, when they get into the business, they're so focused on units or how many homes they're selling. And I think there's, it's interesting how everyone, most people go to college to learn whatever or their trade, then they can go out and make money. But there's really no college ground for real estate. It's kind of like a 2-3 week course. And then you just go out into the world and they're just like, hey, go sell homes for people. And so, I think like that first year, you think more and more people would look for places that, it wasn't all about necessarily the splits or commissions or things like that. And it just really be like, hey, this is my training ground for Just someone give me the knowledge, like what do I have to do on a consistent basis? What does this business look like?
Yeah, 100%. And I mean, you know better than anyone too, right? Like you get your license, and the schooling to get your license doesn't prepare you on how to be a real estate agent or how to sell a real estate agent. And most brokerages are not going to teach you that either. They don't really have the time to. So it's really about finding someone that can mentor you, or getting on a team that's going to actually teach you and educate you on how to generate business.
So what's business look like for you now?
Business has been pretty good. I just had my best month ever. I think it was, what did it end up coming in at? I closed 5 deals.
Nice.
It was a little over 3 million in production. I think it was actually 3.6. And a lot of that is 100% from what you do 30, 60, 90 days prior, right? So the business you want now, you better have generated 2, 3 months ago. Quarter 4 was really slow. I think for a lot of people, it was kind of slow, right? And then right after the first of the year, it was like just like a light switch turned on, and business came back, and just kind of hit the ground running. But a lot of that, and we could probably transition to 75 hard now, like a lot of that is why I chose to do 75 hard. So just to give a little bit of backstory, I started 75 hard back in, I think it was 2019. And back then I did it for the fitness goals and the aspect of that, right? Like I wanted to lose weight. I wanted to get back in shape. I wanted to set those habits of working out. And that was why I wanted to do it. I made it 46 days, didn't cheat, hit everything right on. Ended up proposing to my now wife back then, and my sister and her husband were in town visiting, and they wanted to go out and celebrate. We were newly engaged. It was Christmas time. And part of 75 hard is you can't drink alcohol for 75 days. And so I was like, oh man, I'm like 30 days out. Am I really going to break it here? And, it's once in a lifetime thing to be able to celebrate something like that. So I made the decision to go ahead and break that. And we went out and had a good time and celebrated. I was also dealing with a few nagging injuries, so that probably helped a little bit, if I'm being honest. But looking back on it, like it's all the wrong reasons to do something like that. Like it's not a fitness challenge. Yes, the fitness.
And what is it? So I mean, you and I know what it is, but like most of the world actually doesn't know what 75 hit. So break down like what 75 hard is. Like what do you have to do to accomplish that?
So 75 hard, 75 stands for 75 days. So it's 75 straight days, not any days off, no cheats, no substitutions, no nothing. And then part of that is you have to do 2 separate 45-minute workouts a day. One of them has to be outside. So you could do both outside. That doesn't matter, but one of them has to be outside, rain or shine. And there's definitely some days where I got caught in the rain, put my rain jacket down, and I was like, well, I guess this is go time. So that's one aspect of it. Second aspect, you have to drink a gallon of water a day. You have to take a progress photo every single day. You have to read 10 pages of a nonfiction book. Audiobooks do not count. You have to read the physical book. What else is there? You have to pick a diet and stick to it. So like it could be any diet, honestly. But just like be honest with yourself when you pick it, of like, okay, what are things that you struggle with in your diet, and probably take those things out and make it healthy. So like for me, I took out a lot of processed carbs, like bread, chips, tortillas are like my 3 main critical ones that just affect me the most. So I took those out along with like sweets and things like that. Let's see, am I forgetting anything? I think that's it.
75 days straight. You just rain or shine. You said 1 indoor, 45 minutes, 1 outdoor. I mean, I know Andy Frisella, who actually, owns kind of that whole 75 hard. And man, I listened to his podcast and he talks about that. It's so interesting to me how people like that just go so focused on something, how they just change their lives, because like most people would say like, oh my gosh, that's too intense, right? Like that's way too intense. Everyone, that's too intense. 2 workouts a day, reading books, gallon of water, sticking to a diet. And I like how he doesn't even get involved in the diet. Like he's like, I'm not a nutritionist, like just pick your diet. This isn't that kind of process. It's pick one. He's teaching a pick something and stick to it for 75 days. I don't want to get involved in what it is, just pick it and you'll win just by picking it and sticking to it. But man, it's so interesting how like what were your biggest like I'm going to start with like what did you love the most about it? Because you're about 2 weeks off of it right now. Like you've been done with it for about 2 weeks.
Yeah, it's probably something like that.
What was the best part
Um,
of it?
I think the best part of it was just having direction for my day. Like that's actually why I started it, right? Is like I'm very bad with self-discipline, and you would think like, oh, you just did 75 hard, you're really disciplined. Like, no, I'm not. That's why I did it. I knew like, circling back a little bit, like Q4 was slow, right? And I know Q1 of stuff that you and I had talked about and implementations that I was about to be doing. It was like, okay, this is about to be grind time for work, and I need zero distractions. So I actually backtracked into 75 hard of being like, how can I make sure that I keep distraction free and keep my focus of hitting my goals for business and knowing that like I'm going to be working a lot. And I thought about 75 hard when I did it for the 46 days in 2019. Like it's the best emotionally, physically, mentally I had ever felt. As far as just like clear minded, and my production rose back then too. And I didn't even really notice it at the time, but looking back, I was like, oh, my production rose when I was doing that. So I was like, you know what? I'm going to start this. I started just before the first of the year. I was like, I'm going to start this knowing that I'm about to be in like grind season, and I wanted to just propel me that much more being focused on my goals. So because I'm not self-disciplined naturally, I have to put things in place to discipline me. So like I'm kind of like a robot where if I have a plan that I know I have to stick to and I can be really strict about it, it's not that hard for me to do. Yes, it's, exhausting to do sometimes, but if I have something to stick to, I can do it. But if I don't, it's kind of like squirrel. Like what's the next shiny object? You forget about your personal goals. And so for me, it was just about being the best version of myself in order to succeed at my career goals. And that's really why I got into it. And that's what I think helped me the most. So my favorite part about it was just having that routine of something to stick to.
Do you do you ever feel like it's just easier to be more hardcore? Like I realize I'm kind of all in or all out. I don't know if that's you, but and we'll probably go into this because you're off of it now, and I want to talk about how things have been going lately. But I'm more of like I've got to be all in on something. It can't just be kind of willy nilly. I don't know why that
Yeah.
is though. So like you've been done for 2 weeks, and so let's kind of back up. I think this would be cool for the listeners to know. So like we met each other like probably 5 months ago,
Yeah.
5 6 months ago. We met each other at a wedding in San Miguel, Mexico.
Yep.
And when we came back, I had reached out to you. I heard you were in real estate, so I'd reached out to you. And what's cool is like I've almost known you majority of the time we've known each other and communicated. You were going through somewhat of that journey, and so it was really cool to see. So we how do you think we went from like meeting each other at the first time at a wedding and then all of a sudden turn into like accountability partners, like not even really planning it? Where do you think that comes from? Because like I think you have like I have friends that just like we've known each other for so long, and even though we might be on different trajectories now, like we're on different career paths, different goals in life, you still have like this common bond of something in your youth that you had in common, and you just kind of always stay in touch with them and you love them for that. And then you meet some
Yeah.
people in your life where you meet them and maybe it's they're in the same industry or the same goal that you have or something like that. But that's I feel like that's where our paths cross, where we met each other at a wedding, both in real estate, both kind of driven the same way. And but how do you think that turned into that? So I think more people
You
need it.
know, yeah, definitely. I definitely think more people need it. I think the timing was just insane for when we had met, not only professionally, but personally. Like, I know that that's kind of when you started. Well, it really started to motivate me a little bit when I'd see your damn IG stories all the time of like checking in dues paid at 4 a.m., 4:30. And I'm like, what time does this guy wake up? Like, how does he have so much time for this? And so that got motivating. So I started doing the alarm clock, waking up early, texting you. And then, it wasn't long after where I was like, okay, let's take this to the next level of, let's try to be more consistent and disciplined with this. I don't know for, for everyone it's kind of different. Like everything kind of happens for a reason if you let it and you take like what you learned from that, right? And I think the timing for us was I was just very much in needing of some sort of accountability, and you were kind of already on that journey of your morning routine and stuff, and it just kind of clicked perfectly.
Yeah, that was actually so I thank God all the time for the seasons that we go through in life. So it was probably, 8 or 9 months ago when the market just started slowing down. Like we were running for 2 years, a straight run, and like I would get up and just run. And then the day would end and you needed to like have 2 hours of peace at night, and then you'd go to bed, wake up and just run. Like it was order taking market just telling you what to do. And if you were in the game and you wanted to play it at a high level, you could clean up, and it was really cool. But like 8, 9 months ago, it slowed down. And, I remember being on the phone with my mom, and I just always try to find like the cool thing about what season I'm going through. And I told her, I was like, this feels kind of good. And she's like, why? And I was like, because I can breathe again. Like business is still going down, like, and sometimes still just as much business. It feels like it goes a little bit slower and I don't got to go as quick. And it was that season for my life where I was like, man, I feel like I can get up and like take care of myself. And not saying I couldn't have then, it just wasn't on the radar. So it like got me thinking. So I started getting up again. I was like, okay, like I'm going to do my Bible study and journal. I'm going to go to the gym. I'm going to do my cold plunge and just make my breakfast and really like start. I remember Gary Keller used to always say, like, put yourself together in the morning and then go give like value to the world. But he'd always say, like, you've got to put your, like, it's an inside job, like put yourself together early in the morning and then go offer value to the world. So like you kind of met me probably 4 months into that like journey. And that's like when we met each other at the wedding. But so do you think that the accountability back and forth on a daily basis was a good idea? Like, is that something that kept you going on some days?
It definitely was helpful for sure. Like everyone's different in this regard. Like some people, I know people that can just get up and they've had this, morning workout routine or health routine or whatever it may be for years, and they don't need any accountability, right? Like they're in their zone, and they're probably a little bit more introverted. I'm not that way at all. Like it's hard for me, especially being in our career, right? Independent contractor, owning your own business. Like you don't necessarily have an office to go into every day unless you're on a team or something like that. So it can get lonely. And so for me, like I enjoy being able to share that with someone, like successes and failures, and just be able to talk it out, right? So like that's motivating for me in general, which is what we have and our whole crew has, which has been super helpful without having to go into an office every day per se. Um, but I think that it just varies and depends on the person. But like for me, that's very helpful. But I also put it out there, like I posted it on Instagram purposely. Like I didn't want to because I had done that before and then I failed. And so like my vulnerability was like, okay, I don't really want to tell too many people I'm doing it or put it out there because what if I don't do it? And that's the exact mindset that you have to like overcome and get through is you have to put yourself out there and you have to be vulnerable because that's how you kind of help keep yourself accountable. It's like it's easier for me to let myself down than it is to let other people down. And so I put that out there. I told you, I started telling a bunch of people like, hey, I'm doing it. Not because I really cared. I wanted people to know I'm doing it, but be like, I wanted people to check in and be like, hey, man, you still keeping with it? Are you still doing that? And those are the things that I would remember on those early mornings when I didn't want to, or when the late night workouts I had at like 10 o'clock to try and get it done. Is like, hey, if I fail this, someone's going to ask me tomorrow how it's going, and I'm going to have to tell them I failed. And like, I don't want to do that.
Dude, that's so cool. That's so cool. Yeah, it is. I did that in a few avenues before, and just you got to like commit to something. And it's part of it's knowing who you are. Like I did the same thing before. Like I tell people like this is what I'm gonna do. And it's almost sometimes in the weird way, it's the only reason you're still doing it. But like it's just
Yep.
but here's the deal. And I'm like, that's cool though. Cause I'm like, if you have a goal and that's the way you tick and you need to do it that way, I'm like, that's a really good way to do it is tell the world what you're gonna do. And almost you kind of do it in a way where you're like it's kind of like a challenge me, like
Yep.
you're almost going through the day and you're like, I want you to challenge me, like hit me up. I'm waiting for someone to like challenge me in 2 weeks and be like, yo, you still on it? Because some of those people are your homies or their friends and they're rooting for you, right? And then
Yep.
some of them are actually waiting for you to fail. So it's
a
almost
hundred
like this,
percent.
it's kind of this cool thing because some people are checking in on you because they're like me, where I'm like, props, dude, like, let's go, you know? And then there's other people I think that check in that they're like, they're kind of checking in on you to wait for you to say like no. And then they can kind of like in the background kind of chuckle a little bit and be like, hey, I knew we couldn't commit to that. You know, I knew it wouldn't happen.
It's 100% true. And like going back, like you'd said, like, some people would say it's extreme. It is extreme, right? But and I'm always the one that gets caught up on like different diets, or I was vegan for a year and a half or whatever else. So I will do the extreme shit. And like, I kind of like that. I'm very much like you, like I'm all in or I'm all out. But it's just like people need to change their mindset around what's extreme. Like it was extreme that I was super overweight. I was constantly tired. My business production wasn't there. I wasn't as good of a husband or a father. Like, isn't that's extreme too? It's extreme to not take care of yourself and put yourself first, because if you take care of your body and your mind, everything else falls into place. Like it's not going to be a perfect life, but it's going to be a hell of a lot easier. It, Even though like having that daily discipline and waking up when it's still dark outside and it's 35 degrees outside and you're out there running or whatever else, like, yeah, that's hard, but everything else gets a lot easier. And at the end of it, you're always grateful for it. So it's like, I try to tell people that I've talked to since then, because a lot of people have hit me up and like, hey man, I saw your journey. I want to do this. Any tips, tricks, whatever, blah, blah. And it's like, why? I always tell people like, why are you doing it? Like, what do you want out of this? Because if you just want the fitness aspect of it, like you might not succeed. But if you really want to just try to be the best version of yourself and get dialed in and disciplined on not giving up on yourself and not having excuses, then you'll probably succeed and you'll really enjoy it.
I like how you mentioned that the lifestyle you were living was kind of extreme. You know, I think we are in a world where, like, for example, I remember I'm 39 now, but probably like 28 to 30, around that period of my life, I didn't drink. And it was really interesting because like I just didn't drink alcohol. And so it was just like I remember there was one day that I was just like, I'm not gonna, drink, right, for just a little bit. And I've always kind of been probably like you, just kind of these, I call them science projects, like I'm just doing something to just try to do something different, challenge myself. And so I was like, I'm not gonna drink. And dude, that went for 2 years. And it just like it was almost like a every week I was just like, no, I'm good. I'd go to a party. No, I'm good. I'd go to an event. No, I'm good. And I kept going down this road. What I found, Mike, is how many people, and this is fine that they did it, it's fair, but like how many people question you on the decisions that you make in your life. And it's I just accepted it, but as I thought about it more as I got older, I was like, man, what a challenge. I was thankful I was strong through that process, because like, people would ask me like, oh, do you have like a problem with drinking? And I was like, no. And people at parties would be like, oh, like, are you going to drink? And I was like, no. Like, and I'm talking about like going to, like, when I say a party, I'm talking about like a client event, or like a social setting of like 10 people at Top Golf. Like, I'm not talking about like going to a house party, I'm talking
Yeah.
about just going to events. And man, it was like I almost had to justify myself every event on why I wasn't drinking. And it
Yeah.
was really, really interesting. And I was like, whoa, this could be challenging for some people. Like I already have a little bit of like fire in me a day. Like we're like, challenge me, I'm good, right? Like
Yeah.
I kind of live for that moment. But like I'm like, man, if someone was really trying to go through a journey and they were a little like timid or a passive personality, they almost just feel like they have to keep going down this road because they wouldn't want to be open for the conversation. Kind of like when somebody's like, hey, you don't have kids, and then they start asking more questions. Like if you couldn't have kids, like that could be a hard topic to talk about, right?
Yeah.
It's kind of the same thing. It's like when oh, I'm not drinking, like, oh, why? And it's like, wait, like, okay, like, look, really? And
Yeah.
I started joking with some people, and I'd ask them why they are drinking. And that got weird quick, dude. Like they'd be like, oh, why aren't you drinking? I'd be like, can you tell me why you are? And I was like, whoa, like that's just my personality. And I was like, I stopped doing it because I think they were asking me a question and I was turning it and they weren't ready for it. They were like, whoa, this is heavy quick. Why do you think people like think that like people just kind of going a different route of what the world's saying to do is like abnormal? Or why do you think everyone challenges that? Or why would they think that working out 2 times a week is, or 2 times a day is extreme, but yet not working out for a week Like, you know what I mean? Like, why do you think
Yeah.
people think that way?
I think it's for most people, and I've thought about this a lot because I've been that person, right? Like a lot of times I've been that
Me
person.
too.
And I think it's like your subconscious mind of trying to defend why you're not doing anything, right? Like regardless of what that may be, whether it's someone trying to eat healthy, right? Or someone that's not drinking, or someone that's exercising, or a new journey, right? Like if trying to break out of the shell of what people know you as is very difficult in a social cultural setting of like parties or just going out with friends or whatever it may be. Like I was in that same position as you many a times. Like people like, oh, you're really not drinking? And I had so many opportunities of like I got Suns tickets one day and got passes the back, which is all you can eat, all you can drink. I'm a huge Suns fan, love basketball, have had those passes before, and it's a great time. And I said like I couldn't. I'm like, oh, I'll be DD, don't worry about it, right? Like you learn a lot about yourself. You learn a lot about like being able to be in those settings and trying to become comfortable with it. But I think the reason that a lot of people do that is I don't think they're doing it purposely. Like I think most people don't even realize it. But I think subconsciously it's like them trying to defend themselves for whatever reason may be of what's going on in their life of why they're not doing it.
Yeah.
And I've been there. I've done that more often than not.
Mhm.
But then once you start to realize that, it's like I'm just being a hater because I'm making excuses why I'm not doing it.
Glad you said that, Mike, because yeah, there's no judgment in this as we're talking, right? I definitely don't want anybody to think we're on any high horse. Like,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
coming to my office today, like there's 27 things. I'll write the list for people if they want to know like what's going wrong in my life. Like, there's no like I've got a lot of things I gotta fix. So we're just having what I love about this conversation is it's gotten off of real estate, which I wanted to do more of on the show because disciplines, going to lead into people selling more homes, but it's just an honest conversation. And like I think you're right when you say that. Like I feel when they ask questions like that. I did too. I would look back and think, why did they say that? And I was like, you know what? It's probably something that they might be wanting to deep down, and they just don't have the discipline. So, but I've realized I'm on the opposite side of that a lot too. Like I'll ask the question to somebody, and I'm like, man, I'm just being the same person, right? So there's no ill intent with the question is what I noticed because
Yeah,
I'll ask it a lot too. What I realized through that journey was I just tried to just give people props more, so
yeah,
when somebody tells me like, oh, I'm doing this, I'm like, oh, that's awesome, man. Instead of asking like why, I just like lean into like that's awesome, or like
yep,
trying to encourage them because I'm like, really, there's something to that they might not even want to talk about openly, and nor do I deserve they don't owe me any explanation of what's going on in their life. So like when someone tells me like, hey, this is what I'm doing, I'm just like, that's awesome. You know what I mean? Like
yeah.
whatever it is, like if that's what you're trying to do it. And I want to encourage that. But yeah, that 2 years was very interesting. Or I went on like in January's, I'll usually do something for 30 days. Like it was last year, I think it was Whole 30. Uh, Dude, and I couldn't even explain what Whole 30 was. If my wife didn't put food in front of me for 30 days, I would have probably just died. And then I would like going through that, people would ask questions. I know I went on a stint where I was doing 2 workouts a day. I was doing morning and night, and I was doing like hours on the stair steppers. And I remember actually people being like, hey, I don't think that's healthy. And I'd be like, no one was like questioning when I like drank 3 Coca-Colas a day and had 4 Snicker bars. You know what I mean? I'm like, please get involved in my life when that's going on again because I'm also that person. So like if you see me drinking 2 Coca-Colas and eating 9 bowls of chips and salsa at Carlos O'Brien's, when we were out, could you please talk about that? Because that is my problem. The working out 2 days is not, right? It's like, please keep clapping when that's going down. And then when the Snicker bars are coming out, like, let's stop, let's question that. But it was so funny how any negatives I was doing, it felt like it was applauded, but any tried like positives was always this question of like, well, I don't know, that's kind of extreme, or I don't know if, like if you work out 2 times a day on the stair stepper, your knees might be bad when you get older. And I'm like, yeah, that could be true, but also like all the other things I was doing were super bad for me. So it's just, it's just interesting how this world works. And
Well,
like I think
what's funny about that is when people would make comments to me about it too, people that are already were living like a pretty healthy lifestyle never had anything negative to say about it. They're like, oh, damn, that's crazy. That's awesome. Keep it up, whatever. And we're very positive and reinforcing. And people that didn't live that lifestyle, that like, I know, right? I'm like, I know you don't necessarily live a quote unquote healthy lifestyle, whatever that may be for people. We're usually the ones that were the biggest haters on it. And not haters and like we were saying, like meaning to, right? Like I think a lot of people do it without even realizing it, which is fine. Like I don't take offense to anything. And I like those conversations because then sometimes I can get someone else thinking about it in a different way. Very much how I used to be that same person. Um, and someone the other day, I'm trying to remember who it was. I saw an IG story the other day and they said exactly what you're saying. Like they are very fit and they would post pictures, like topless photos of like progress, right? And they're doing macros counting and things like that. And they had said, like, a lot of people have been really concerned about me saying that I'm too skinny. And he's clearly not too skinny, just very good shape. He's like, but if I'm, overweight or not exercising, like no one's gonna sit there and call me out and say, hey, you're overweight. You need to get this under control. Maybe you should cut back on this or that. It's exactly what you're just saying, and I've been in that same boat as well. It's definitely a culture thing. I don't know really how you break away from that, but I definitely think it's just people's kind of own personal insecurities of trying to just validate their unhealthy decisions.
Yeah. Yeah. I just learned to get through it like kind of the same way you did. Like when I said like people like there was no lengthy conversation about it. Like they just asked me a question.
Yeah.
I'm a deep thinker, so I would leave and think like, why do people ask those types of questions? But yeah, like I just learned you just do what you want to do in life, and you realize that 50% of people are rooting for you, 50% of the people might not be, and really it doesn't even matter. So I'm like, hey, this is what I'm going to do today, and then you'll get the questions. People will ask you stuff, just answer them appropriately. You can keep answers short if you want to. You can go in depth if you want to. But really, I just focused on just, hey, I'm going to live my life. And as long as I'm enjoying my day, that's really all that I feel matters. And if they're, and the cool part is I would think if they're enjoying their day, that's all that matters. Like one of my mentors once told me that everybody wastes time and wastes money on their own things. So like, like when you're thinking of like, man, like that guy's wasting a lot of time. And then I'm just like, as I'm sitting there, like watching Netflix, and I'm thinking about this guy, so my mentor wants like everybody waste money on their own things and everybody wastes their time on their own things. We just all waste money and waste our time on different things. So it's not coming to terms with what we want to waste our time or money on. It's just coming to
Yeah.
terms actually with like, just allow everybody to do that. And if they're living their life they want, then God bless them. So let's go into maybe more of our vulnerabilities. Because like I said, I don't want anybody to think we're on any high horse. Like you and I text each other often, and there's a lot of things that we're trying to fix or work on. So you've been off 75 hard for like 2 weeks. And I feel like whatever I was on while I was with you, I had no program name for it. It was just like, I lost like 16 pounds going through that journey with you. Right.
Dude,
So,
yeah, you've been
but
crushing it.
but I had no plan. Like there was
Yeah.
I didn't have a structure like you did, except for just like legitimately like less chips and salsa, right? Like
Yeah.
that's my plan. I'll sell. Um, you got off that like 2 weeks ago, went on a trip that you had planned. I'm sure you planned your 75 hard accordingly to that trip. When you went on that trip and we stopped kind of texting back and forth, I don't feel like I was even on a point as much. And it made me realize through that how like what a positive you were to like me staying on track. And so one, thank you for helping me through my journey of like going through that. Cause like you legitimately, like I remember I'd text you like sometimes like 5:30 in the morning and I would just like give you my weight. And like it went like that all the time. But what's interesting is that stopped, right? And so where do you where do you think that stopped? Why did that stop? How are you doing now? I'll openly tell you how I'm doing now, and then let's figure out how we can get back on track. So I think like this is the portion where we get off the high horse, and it's like
Yeah.
let's talk about now like struggles that we can have together with people and try to figure it out.
100%. And I'm like honestly most excited about this conversation because I think it's what everyone struggles with,
Mhm.
us included, right? Is I lived a very unhealthy lifestyle before 75 hard. And so part of 75 hard was like it wasn't the fitness or health aspect, but it was just the discipline of a bunch of different things to get including fitness and health back in my life. Since 75 hard, I did have that trip. It's just like a boys weekend trip we do once a year for March Madness. A lot of heavy binge drinking, eating like crap, right? And which is okay. Like it's okay to splurge. It's okay to let loose, have fun, this and that. But it's about, and I talked to you about this before I left, right? Like I've just gotten really in tune with what my triggers are and how I'm going to fall off the wagon again. And I remember I called you, I was on a walk and I called you and I was like, hey, man, I'm going on this trip and I know me and I'm going to fall off. So like, let's get something in place for when I come back so that we can get back on track. Right. So it's like just trying to learn yourself and what your bad habits are and what your tendencies are and try to get ahead of that and plan for it. So completely fell off. We had talked, we had something set up. My whole family got COVID the week after I got back. We were right in the midst of trying to pack up our house. Our nanny wasn't able to come over to help out with the kiddo because obviously we all had COVID. We weren't going to expose her to it. So my wife and I trying to still work, all with COVID, trying to watch after our toddler, trying to pack up the house and get everything moved over to the new house. So we just had a lot going on. So needless to say, just a bunch of excuses. Didn't get anything done that week either. And now here it is, 2.5. It's probably almost 3 weeks now. Just got moved into the new house where I've been completely off the wagon, eating like crap, drinking more than I normally would, not getting up early, exercising and whatnot. And I feel it 100%. And so that's my vulnerability of like, you don't have to be perfect. No one's perfect. Just once you get there, just remember what it was like and how much better you felt. Like, so for me, like my sleep was better. I felt more confident in myself. My clothes fit better. It feels good when you see people you haven't seen in a while and they're like, hey, you look really good. Um, like all that stuff's great. So like, it's just trying to put the perspective back of like, okay, it's okay. Like, don't beat yourself up. Don't try to be perfect. I think that's a lot of it too, is before 75 hard, I would have goals of like, okay, I'm going to go to the gym today. And if I didn't go to the gym or if I went to the gym and it was kind of like a half-ass workout and I know that like I was just going through the motions but I didn't do anything, I would get so down on myself that it was almost like this was a waste of time. And you convince yourself to like just stop doing it, right? But instead, like flip that mindset around of being like, hey, I showed up, and showing up is like 90% of the battle. Like just show up and just be consistent. And you're going to have some days where you're not going to work as hard. But if you're just consistent with it, one, you're going to keep that discipline and that habit and routine. And two, like that's a lot better than just sitting at home and on the couch and not moving at all. Like the last 30 days of 75 hard, I had messed up my back. I was playing a ton of basketball and running, and I probably was doing too much. Messed up my back to where it was like tough to walk it some days. And then my shoulder messed up from like a long injury that I'm still kind of dealing with, going to physical therapy with. But instead of making excuses and being like, oh, I can't finish 75 hard, a lot of days I just had 2 walks. I had 2 walks a day, for a lot of days because that's all my body would allow me to do. And I mean, you saw the before and afters, like your body will still change. And I still kept that habit and I still kept that routine and I still felt really good because I got out of the house and I was moving. So I think that's like main thing is like, don't try to be perfect. Don't even try to do 75 hard. If you're listening to this, you want to change, like just do something and just stick with it, because sooner or later, like you're going to realize when you do get back to your old habits, like where I'm at right now, it's going to be very, very apparent that, oh, I don't feel that good. Like everything in my life has gone down a level and I need to get back to where I was.
Yeah, and do you know why? Do you know why I did this podcast with you? Is because one, I thought I can, right? Because this is like really a real estate show. We texted each other yesterday, like, hey, like, what do we want to talk about? Like, let's just roll with it, right? Let's just freestyle it. But one, I thought, wow, because I can, right? And then I thought, two, we're friends, so I know we can have a cool conversation. But I actually did this in a way where, do you know how you said like when you post, is like when you tell some friends that you're gonna do something, and
Yeah.
then you're like, I gotta kind of stick to it. I know how you and I tick, so I was like, I want to bring him on and talk about that because we've both fallen a little bit off the wagon the last 2 weeks. I've been casually working out. I'm dealing with a shoulder injury too right now. Like I got to go get an MRI, and so like the gym's been really hard for me. It's almost like it's kind of frustrating to me because when you see such progress and then it hits you like that, you're just like, ah, man, like now I can't do any like arms or anything like that. My buddy, my accountability buddy, another one that I have was like, hey man, leg season. He was like, those legs are looking small. Maybe it's time to go on that for a few months. And I was like, man, like so cool to like see like that friend of my life. I love that because he wasn't going to allow me. Like he texted me, he's like, how's working out? And I was like, well, I can't. And he just was like, hey, well, it's leg season. And I was like, man, like, what a cool friend to have in your life that, like, one allows you to be like, hey, I get it. Like, obviously, don't kill your arm, like, or your shoulder. Don't do that. Like, but hey, you've got a lower body there, right? Like, maybe this is an opportunity you're going to look back on in like a year and be like, that's how that happened. But I did this podcast because I knew you and I both needed it. And it's the same thing when you're like, hey, I shared with the world that I was going to do 75 hard and stuck to it. What's cooler than now? Like, we got a podcast probably dropping in like 2 weeks, 3 weeks, whenever Kylie puts this out. And so what's cool is like, this isn't probably coming out for another 3 weeks. And so now, like, who are we going to actually show up? Like, are we going to be the version we want to be when that 3 weeks, like nothing's weirder than this one releasing and then us have gained like 7 pounds, right? Like this one releases and I'm like back to my chips and salsa addiction in a back alley, just like eating it. And like you're back on bread and stuff. So like that's kind of why I did this because I know how you and I tick, and it's just we're letting the world know now, like, hey, this is what we're working on. Are we perfect? No. But that's why I did it, man. Hopefully you're cool with that. I know I didn't tell you
Yeah,
all the
absolutely.
intentions of it, but I knew you would appreciate it and probably respect it.
100%, dude. I love it.
So what as we're wrapping up, because I know this is a big challenge is when someone's going through a fitness journey in a household. I've actually dialed this down. I've thought about it. I think a lot, and I thought, man, like when I'm talking to people about their real estate goals, it's usually simpler because it's them, right? Like it's just. But when I'm talking about like fitness goals, it feels like it's a family dynamic. Like people who have other people in a household, they might not be ready for that journey yet. And how do you think that people can get through this with like a family around them? Like, did your wife do the same thing, or did you guys just, when you went to restaurants and things, you just ate differently?
No, my wife's very pregnant, so she definitely would not be down for the 75 hard. And in general, she's very different than I am. Like I like the extreme stuff. She knows I do, and she's not that way at all. But she doesn't necessarily need to be either. She's a little bit different. She takes a little bit different with that. So I'm glad you brought that up because that's hard for me. Like I was telling you, like I like doing it with other people or sharing it with other people. So to not be able to do it with my wife, who I live with, right? It can be very difficult. But the main thing I just focus on is like instead of me trying to force it on her or someone else, it's like those are just kind of more excuses and more obstacles. It's like, no, this is about me and my journey. And there are some like the walks I would go on with my son for like an hour or whatever. After doing that for a while, like she'd start to be like, oh, I think I might come with you guys. And so I think if you just show up and you're the best version of yourself, like those around you will start to kind of gravitate towards that and maybe want to make some changes as well. But that's kind of how it worked out for us. Like I just had to be dialed in and focused on my own stuff. I mean, she's kind of used to me going on crazy diets and things like that. She's actually super supportive with that. And so sometimes she'd even call me out. She's like, "Are you allowed to be having that?" I'm like, "Yes, I am actually. Thank you."
That's cool, man. Yeah, because I found that, and it's just a lot of excuses, right? Like there's been times where I'm like, oh well, this happened because of this, right? Like something, my wife might not always be going on the same challenge as I am either. But what I realized quickly is how almost at every restaurant they have options that you can get out of there alive. So it wasn't trying to change the other person and what our activities are. I mean, if you go to Texas Roadhouse, Cheesecake Factory, I mean, anything that's like a sit down restaurant, you can usually walk out of there with a pretty, there's a chicken there and a broccoli and there's a steak and there's a baked potato, you know. But I mean, so like at fast food restaurants, definitely you're not getting out of there. But like at any sit down restaurant, there are options for you to say, like, hey, I don't got to change any of our like family dynamic. If that's normally where we go or we like to go out twice a week, like it came back to me. It was like, I've got to be able to sit here at this restaurant and not get a cheesecake at the Cheesecake Factory. You know what I mean? That's hard for me. So it was this whole oh, we're gonna go there, so I'm gonna fail. That's always outwardly, like all I was telling myself is, man, you're not mentally disciplined. Like you aren't, like you control your body and you can't get into a cheesecake factory without eating 1,200 calories of a cheesecake. That's how I talk to myself. That's like I'd be walking in there and mentally I'm like, you can walk in here and get out of here without a cheesecake. Like there's a steak, there's some broccoli, and you get out of here alive. And
Yeah.
that's I'm sitting at the table and the guys ask me what I want to eat. And I have this whole other thing that wants to come out of my mouth, but I'm like, the steak and baked potato, and it's like you just get out of there. So it's like I want, just you don't have to live a whole different life. It's just you can still do the same stuff. You just got to make personal decisions through that. But and Mike, as we're wrapping up, there was two things that we did in this journey that I laughed at. One was when you text me the before and after photos and you said something about like I'm no longer 7 months pregnant. Was that what you said?
Yeah.
Was that
Yeah.
it? Okay. That made me laugh.
Yeah. That was it. That was it.
Okay. Because that picture, dude, that was wild. Like I'm super proud
I
of you on
know.
that photo. I was like, dang, that's cool. And then you asked me another thing you asked me during the journey was at one point it was like 5 in the morning and you asked me if I like what type of drug did you ask if I do?
Adderall.
Yeah, I was like, I know that like gives you energy, but you like legitimately asked me that. And I was like, no, this isn't like a joke. Like, oh, it's 4:30 in the morning. This is like he's straight up asking me a question. Like, is this for real? Like, do you do this? And I was like, no, I never have. But that was like the two things where I was like, this is super funny, just so people can see kind of what the context of our conversations that we have sometimes in the morning early. As we're wrapping this up, man, what's the what's some last words that you would want to leave with people that are just thinking about like just changing anything in their life? I mean, it doesn't have to be fitness. I think the cool part about this is I think we all have something, meaning like the person who's already really, really like eats perfectly or healthy and goes to the gym all the time. Like, let's say there's a realtor out there right now. It's like super fit, right? They're super fit. Their eating's on point, but they're just like, man, I want to sell 12 homes a year. Like you probably need to figure out some type of program to get hardcore on closing more deals, where
Yeah.
like we're realtors that already close deals. So like our weakness is that. So like that's why we're hardcore on that. But I've noticed with a lot of people is like it's hard to have like 4 and 5 really good disciplines. So like I feel like when I'm closing a lot of houses, it's harder to be on track here. And when I'm super on track with my fitness, it's hard to sell a lot of houses. It just shows you like there's only so much willpower in the day. So you almost have to like get in these rhythms of routines. Otherwise, like if you get out of the routine, it just all falls apart. But what do you think that like people need to be left with? Because you went through the journey. I did not. I was just a part of it and did the best I could.
I think something for me that I've talked with a lot of people about during the 75 hard and especially after that I think a lot of people would like to change and feel like they can't is the no drinking thing. And like I love booze. I like red wine. I like beer. And I'm not going to necessarily stop drinking it, but it's just about picking and choosing like when to be a little bit more strategic about when you do allow yourself to have some drinks. And that's something I would have told you prior to 75 hard. Like I probably have a couple drinks a week, but then when you are strict about not doing it, you start to realize like, damn, my initial reaction right now is to order a cocktail or order a beer. And if it's only one or two, but that's, 3, 4 times a week. And then some of those times, those 2 beers turn into 4 beers, like you probably consume more than you even realize. But I would just say for most people, like, don't change your habits or your social activities just because you're trying to cut out some booze a little bit more out of the week. Like go into go to all the same parties or all the same activities that you would, knowing that like you're going to be DD and you're just going to be drinking water or whatever it may be that night. Like 2 of my buddies wanted to go to Beer Barn out here in Gilbert, and it was literally a day before I was done with 75 hard. They don't have food at this place. They don't have anything but beer. Like that's it, just beer. And I could have easily said no or like been like, hey, can we go somewhere else? I'm not drinking. But instead, like I started to really lean into like putting myself in situations and just making it okay and still having a good time. Like I think people don't realize until they stop. And it takes a while to get comfortable with that. Like I'm not gonna lie, you ain't gonna love it the first time. But like you can still go and have a good time. You can still go socialize. You could still go to happy hours and you don't need to have drinks and you'll still have fun. Like it's going to take a little bit of practice and work to not feel weird and to deal with the questions because people are definitely going to ask you. But it's okay. And it doesn't mean you have to cut it out 100%. Like just pick and choose your spots of when you will have a few drinks and when you don't. Like yesterday I went to lunch. I'm not doing 75 hard. I went to lunch. Got chicken wings at a sports bar, and my initial reaction when the server asked like what I want to drink is like I'm thinking I want a beer. But I was like, you know what? I've already drank a little bit this last weekend, and I really don't need a beer. Like a beer or two is not going to do anything for me, and I just got water. But I would never have done that before. It's just like I've now trained myself. Like I don't need a beer every time I go out and grab something to eat. So I would just say for people, like put yourself in uncomfortable situations where you would normally drink and just don't, and you'll see that like you can do it.
Yeah. And you kind of find out if you have a little bit of a problem or not, in my honest opinion. Like,
Yeah,
I'm being serious. Like, when someone says that, I'm like, I would start challenging that sooner than later to find
yeah,
out. Cause like, if you genuinely can't go out with more than 3 or 4 people and drink, like, that would be something I'd really internally be looking at, because I'm not saying like, like, I'm not saying you don't ever have to drink, right? I'm just saying, like, if you couldn't, if that really is something that you're processing in your head, like, I don't know how I would do. Now, maybe the 75 days is extreme, right? But like, I mean, definitely, like, I was just talking to a buddy of mine about some things that he does, and I was like, "Hey, man, have you ever went like a day or two without?" And he's like, "Not in a long time." I was like, "Dude, as your friend, man. I'm like, I'm actually challenging you to just try that, right?" And I won't explain what it was, but I'm like, I would just really just try to try it for like a day or two and find out like who you are,
yeah,
because that's something that I think that we need to, sometime. And maybe that was me again. Maybe like that was me being on my, maybe that was me doing the whole like, why are you doing this? But he had came to me and asked me, he was asking me for some help on some stuff. So it felt like it was an appropriate time. It wasn't a casual setting. This is a really, really good person I know. But yeah, dude, I think that you were on the right track when you said like alcohol. I was talking to a lender that I refer business to, and he posted like his 10-year sobriety, like probably a month ago. He posted this on
hmm
Facebook, and I called him up. He's a good friend of mine now. And I was like, dude, I'm so proud of you, man. Like, that's so awesome. And we started talking about things, and I said, man, isn't it interesting? And maybe someone can hit me up after this and tell me that I'm wrong. But I was like, isn't it interesting anymore? Where like, if there's any more than like 3 or 4 people in a group anymore outside of like church, like, really hard to find anymore where you go with like 4 or 5 people and there isn't like alcohol involved. And that
yeah,
like really is interesting to me, because I'm like, it's even like in the movie theater now. It's like every event, like now I think at college, like football. It's just like it's almost like in every setting. Like it's at like Top Golf, it's at putt golf. It's like legitimately, and I know it's like how businesses make probably most of their profit, but like I started thinking about it more and more, and I'm like, it's at almost every setting where like 3 or 4 people gather together. But it's super interesting. So I can see where the challenge lies in everybody on like figuring this out. But like, and I'm just speaking out loud, even myself, of things I'm going through in life right now. But I was having that conversation with them, like, man, like it is everywhere. So like it's in almost every social thing we do. So I can see where we sit back sometimes and think like, how do we go out and with 4 and 5 people and not? And I do a lot. So, but I can see where it is a huge challenge. But man,
I
yeah.
think with that, like based on conversation I've had with a lot of people, is like it's not the alcohol problem they have, right? It's like something else that they're trying to cope with or deal with. And a lot of times in social settings, it's social anxiety. Like I think in our society, especially since everything's gone to like Zooms, right? Or people working from home and they're not getting out as much. Like if you're just an introverted person in general, you're not going to love those social settings all the time, depending on who you're with and how many people it is. Like it might be something you're uncomfortable with, and a few drinks help, take the edge off. But to those people specifically, because I've found just in conversations, private conversations with a lot of people, it's like that tends to end up being why it is. I personally don't have that, right? Like I can be in any room or any setting, talk to anyone or make friends with or without booze. But like if that's what it is, like figure it out and then just like put yourself in those situations more and just teach yourself and train yourself that like you can have a good time. You don't have to have a few drinks because you don't have a drinking problem. You have a fear of social settings and a bit of social anxiety. So like the alcohol is not helping you with that. It's just pushing it down and you're making it worse. And it's going to be even harder to enjoy hanging out with a few friends or coworkers without a few drinks.
Yeah.
And again, it's not like you can't ever drink. Like I said, like I love beer. I'm not stopping drinking, but just put yourself in those settings a little bit more and then save those drinking nights for, nights that you really want to go out and have some drinks and have fun.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's just like we said, it's just challenging yourself. It could be like for someone like, hey, I'm gonna go a weekend, or like, hey, I'm gonna go 7 days, just like some type of challenge. And what I found is when I'm trying to change certain things in my life, um, I used to always tend to want to like change 19 things all at one time and realize I was wearing
Yeah.
myself out. Now I'm just like, hey, like I just kind of take these little I'll have sometimes where I'm like, hey, I'm just not gonna eat chips and salsa like this week. Like
Yeah.
legitimately, like that is the goal of the week is no like diet plan. I'm just like, if I get rid of chips and salsa, that gets rid of like one Coca-Cola, that leads into like the chicken chimichanga. That leads, you know what I mean? Like it literally like that one move leads into better sleep that night. So it's like it can be just like I think of it like dominoes. Like if you just make one choice differently, like all the domino effects that happen in your week. But dude, I'm
That's
so
your
thankful,
gateway
Mike.
drug.
I'm so thankful for this conversation. Like this is probably as people listen to this, Mike, this is going to be the one where they're either going to be like, "Wow, do more of those," or they're like, "Wow, we totally didn't talk real estate." I so respect the conversation. I appreciate your friendship, and this is going to come out in about 2 or 3 weeks. So we've got some things we got to do. So let's end it with, did you want to make any new commitments coming up? Because I do. I told you what mine were last night, but I'll openly and publicly say what they are.
I do. And part of like why I want to do it the way that I'm gonna do it is because my biggest struggle was obviously accountability, but like I'm all in or I'm all out. So now I want to transition from like, okay, I know I can do it when I'm all in, but let's try to do it with a little bit more balance and still stay consistent with it without being able to completely fall off the cliff and not come back. So I'm going to be doing 45-minute workout a day, 5 days a week. I'm going to give myself 2 days off, and a gallon of water a day because believe it or not, like I know people think they drink a gallon. You probably don't unless you're tracking it. But it actually helped a ton with like my sleep, energy, diet, everything. So a gallon of water a day every day, and then journaling, which I got from you. I always wanted to, and I always see your damn journaling posts. And I'm like, I'm just gonna start journaling. And I've done it a few times, and it's actually super helpful. Just clear your mind first thing in the morning of whatever shit you have on your brain.
Huh?
So that's what I'm sticking with. It's not crazy, it's not extreme. It's just something I want to be consistent with.
Yeah. Cool, man. Mine was 45 minutes of just working out, even if it's a walk, right? So that's
Yep.
7 days a week for me. And then I've got read Bible every day, journal. It had on there, what was it? It was 45-minute workout. It was read Bible and journal. It was my cold plunge every single day. Um, I believe those were it. So yeah, it was pretty
I think
simple.
that's it.
Yeah, but it was just
Yep.
it's getting back on track, man. So appreciate your time. I appreciate your friendship. Honest conversation. I love it. And I think we'll be uh better versions of ourselves by this releasing. Cause you know what's cool is just I don't want to disappoint myself. That's literally
Yeah.
like I don't even look at others anymore. I'm like, I just don't want to disappoint myself. I don't want to be 82 and look back and be like, man, you caused this cancer, or man, you caused this like heart attack, or like, you know what I mean? I know people can't control everything, but I'm like,
Yeah.
there's a lot that we do control. And I'm really just like, I want to wake up at 80 and just be like, hey, you put in a good fight. Like you put in like a good effort where I don't think we all are. And I haven't been in certain times of my life, but I think we'll have better versions of ourselves by this conversation and publicly releasing it because we just had one of the most authentic and vulnerable conversations. And the fact that we're going to release it to the world and let them listen to it and it's just kind of be out there forever. I really think, we'll be able to listen to this in 20 years and we'll see like really where we went with this conversation. It's going to be really cool. But I appreciate you, man.
I appreciate you. Thank you for your friendship, your accountability, and thanks for having me on to chat about it.
Hey, later, buddy.
Later, man.
Bye.